Hello everyone, welcome to today's presentation on forecasting and cash flow modeling with Excel and AI. My name is Mark Hamilton and I am the CFO and Treasurer of Three Notch Group, a mid-market engineering firm with headquarters located in Andalusia, Alabama. And I am also past chair of the State Society and have done technology presentations for the Alabama Society and other societies around the Southeast for many years. I hope that this presentation today will be informative and that we'll be able to open your eyes to some of the new things that are going on with AI and how it can dramatically impact the way we get work done and improve our efficiency and productivity. This is a follow-up to a presentation that we began looking specifically at cash flow modeling, where we developed some of the variables and scenarios and built some spreadsheet tools for building basic models. But today we're going to branch on that and look at how AI and forecasting is integrated with Excel and how that AI can enhance your ability to do more advanced forecasting modeling. The addition of AI into the tools that we use every day, such as Excel, is dramatic, and it has incredible opportunity to enhance our productivity. AI enhances the use of Excel by being able to handle larger data patterns with greater accuracy, flexibility for real-time updating of the data and the modeling. It can detect anomalies in the data and has the ability to do nonlinear modeling. Those tools are now becoming available within Excel in the form of Copilot and also in the functionality that's been added to Excel to be able to do Python scripting. There are also dedicated software tools for doing forecasting, such as HighRadius. And this integration of these tools gives us incredible ability to create AI outputs that we can then compare with our manual calculations, looking for any patterns that the AI picks up that we may have overlooked. It also allows us to use the modeling as scenarios off of baselines, and it always leaves us in a position where our human oversight of the information is what is driving the validity of the modeling. So we're going to go in and look at several different ways to use Excel and AI in doing this type of forecasting modeling. First example we're going to do is to use a CSV data file, which we have opened in Excel. And then with that data, we're going to create a table, introduce the use of Copilot, look at some Copilot prompting. And then from that Copilot prompting, we're actually going to go through an exercise to ask it questions and give it additional information and allow the Copilot to build out the specific forecast graphs that we're looking for. And along the way, I'll point out some tips and things that will be helpful to you as you get started using these tools, avoid a little bit of the frustration. One thing to be aware, I'm showing you is the first iteration of building out this graphing. Always in using AI tools, the best answers come from iterative exercises. I'm not, for sake of time, going to go through a lot of iterations with these data sets and graph creations. But suffice it that this gives you an example of how the graphs can be created, and then you would want to work with them to test, improve the calculations, compare the graphs maybe in one method versus another. So we're going to jump over now and look at the data set. This is test forecast file. It's a CSV file. I've simply opened this up in Excel. Probably looks familiar to you. You see these kinds of data sets frequently, I would assume, coming out of report writers that you run and ask it to save as a CSV, and then you open the CSV file. This particular report has months running across the top, and I'm going to immediately just go up and click on table and insert a table and convert that data over into a table format. Highly recommend that when you're working with data sets in Excel, you always use tables. It's much easier to reference. And so now I'm turning on Copilot here to show you how to work with Copilot. I just click the Copilot button, and you notice that it says at the bottom, before you can use Copilot, you have to turn on autosave. And when I try to turn on autosave in this scenario, I get an error message. And if you look here, what I'm demonstrating is that's because this is a CSV file that I opened. And in order for the Copilot to work, you need to have saved the file as an Excel file. So I convert that over to Excel, and boom, the Copilot opens up. And so there you see Copilot. Hopefully you've used this already. There's a message box at the bottom, but it gives you some prompts above, questions that you might want to ask of the data. It's very, very simple, straightforward to use. You could click on any of those questions, it will respond, or you could go down into the chat menu there and you can begin asking it questions about the data. And so in our scenario today, we're going to look at forecasting, and I put in a prompt here where I said use my data and look over the different data metrics that I have in here and give me a 12-month forecast on particular totals. I only picked out 4 or 5 of those to run. And then from that, give me insight into the methodologies that you use in creating each one of the forecasts. And so it does its little thing, and it comes back and says a forecast tool will be created to project the next 12 months. And it tells me there how it's going to go about doing that for each metric and the methodologies it's going to use. And then down below, it actually has created that data table. So it's pretty straightforward and easy to use. It uses its techniques and then gives you the data, and you can click the button there and insert that data over into a separate sheet. And so you see here now we have from 8/23 forward all of the data organized. And so now I come back, just a little cleaner data set here. I went back and reran that for sake of time. I clipped that editing out, but I got a data set that rolls forward 12 months from 8/25 through 7/26. And so I'm going to have the GPT look at that data set that it just created, that forecasted data set. And what I want it to do here is to combine the actual data that it has pulled from the CSV file we gave it with the forecasted amounts that it finds in this table that it created. And then from that, I just simply want to ask it to create the graphs for me. And so I had it run one query that created the forecast calculations for each of the metrics. And then I had it run a second query to put together that data with the actual data, forecast data together with the actual data, and then create the graphs. And so I'm telling it to combine that data from the sheet 1 with the data set and then create those graphs. So we'll pause here just for a second and watch my slow typing. And I'm going to pull the fields out of the header so that I get them typed in exactly right. Just cut and paste that in there. Tell it to create a trend line graph. And so here it will run. And it's working on it. Understanding the data sets, combining the data sets. And again, this is in real time. I'm doing this on purpose so that you guys can see the kind of the timing component of it. But it's responded, and it said in order to fulfill your request, extracted the data from the data set. Forecast amounts for same metrics will be taken from table 2. The actual forecast data will be combined into a single series and graphed. Sorted chronologically and graphed. There are your graphs. And it tells you the trend line graphs have been created, and you can insert to a sheet, and it will pull those over and add those onto your sheet for you to look at. You also can edit them to some degree by clicking on the actual graph. But I'm asking it here. This doesn't really show me clearly what I want to see. So what I might prefer is to have it add a polynomial trend line on each one of these, and something that's maybe bold and stands out so that I can see the pattern. These trend line graphs that it created may not be what you want to see. And so you also have the option that you could go back into the prompt and tell it more specifically exactly the way you want it to respond and what you would like to see in your graph. And it can add more detail or change the layout or use different colors, different patterns, even use a different type of graph. You have complete flexibility and control. As you see here, I ask it to go into these graphs that it created and add a polynomial trend line in red, and it's running that calculation now and adding that information into the graphing. And you will see in just a moment, it will come back with that detail for us to look at. Again, this is all being done in real time, so you have a sense of perspective of how long it takes the tool to respond to you. It's back. It said that it had an error in the data, but it was able to resolve that. And the error is around the dates. If you notice the column A, the date format with the time on there, could have spent a little bit more effort on the front end and cleaned up that date so that it was more recognizable. That was actually the error that I had earlier, is recognizing that using a Julian format for the date is the best. And so I've clicked on Insert to Sheet, and it's thrown those trend lines onto my actual and forecast data graphs. And so there is a example of using a CSV flat file that we just simply opened up in Excel, and using nothing more than Copilot and prompting went in and asked Copilot to build out these forecast graphs, and it has done so and also added trend lines to those. You do have the ability to continue to interact with the Copilot and the data and ask it questions. And so I went on and continued to do this a bit, and I included a few minutes of that on here where I'm asking it about correlations in the data. You can ask it about the formulas that are used, the forecasting model, specific modeling that's used, and suggest alternative modeling. Maybe there is a particular type of modeling that is better for revenue as opposed to AR. And so you have the ability with the Copilot to ask it questions about the data and about those dynamics and get advice and recommendations, and potentially run it in multiple methods and look at what the forecasting looks like until you can derive something that is to your pleasing. The next example that we're going to go into is a little more involved. Now we're going to use that data set, but this time we're going to retrieve it into Power Query. Using Power Query, we're going to transform and load the data and pull that back into Excel in a table format. And then we'll go back and forth with that a little bit just to familiarize you with the Power Query functionality. We're going to then use the Excel forecast sheet functionality and look at how that works and what it does. Once we pull the data in, we're going to recognize that it has to be modified in order for it to work with the forecast sheet. And so we'll go back into Power Query and look at unpivoting the report, which is a very, very useful tool because a lot of the flat data that we get out of report writers is laid out in a format that is not a clean table. And so we'll do that, and then we'll come back over into the Excel forecast sheet where the graphs are being created, and take a look at those and look at how we might interact with those and modify those, and the flexibility that is provided by this tool. And so here's the Excel sheet opening up. In this scenario, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Data, Get Data, and from the Get Data, I'm going to open up a text file. And I hope you're familiar with this, but if not, this is really the way you want to be using your data sets. I find my test forecast data set and I import it. And you'll notice here what happens is that it opens up a Power Query box asking me to load the data. You also can transform the data before you load it. And so that's what we're going to do here. When we transform, Power Query opens, and you can see your table. You can see the CSV file there and the columns and headers, everything familiar as what we were just looking at before. But within this, we can create and change and edit this data, and then that is ultimately what is retrieved into Excel. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go up and I'm going to add the first row of this table as my headers. And so that changes that, slides it up, makes it look clean. Looks like we've got dollar values and date fields across the top. So this looks pretty good. And so we might want to just filter out only the fields that we're looking to work with. And so this is one way we can transform the data table and only pull back what's needed, remove some of the clutter. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just clicking on a few of these fields to pull in, bring in the whip down at the bottom also, and then we'll click OK. And when we click OK, we will get just those rows, which is the same as filtering in the spreadsheet. So it works a lot like it would work in the spreadsheet, but you have a lot more functionality to transform. So this is an important step here, load and close. When you're done with the transform, you close it and you load that data in. And so now that CSV data is live, if you will. If that CSV file underlying changes, this data can be refreshed without having to do anything more. And here you see on the right side the little query and connections, which is found under the data tab in the ribbon. And there's your query. You click on edit and it will open back up Power Query. So that's the easiest way you kind of jump in and out of Power Query. And if you notice when Power Query opens back up, here it shows you the applied steps. And so it begins with the source data file being open. And then you get to the steps. We changed the type, we promoted the headers, then we changed some of the other headers, and we filtered some rows. And so each one of those steps that we do, close and load, gets us back out. But those steps are identified over in the applied steps. So here's our data set. And here we jump over and I'm showing you where forecast sheet lies on the data tab. And we open that help window up here, and there's some really good information that explains what the forecast in Excel does. It uses that forecast.ets formula that we talked about in the cash flow class to look at the values over time. And it gives you confidence ranges, upper and lower confidence ranges. And so it's telling you here the type of forecast graphing that it's going to do for you. And so that's all good. And so I jump out here and I click it. And I get an error. Nothing happens. And it says the forecast can't be created because the timeline isn't evenly spaced and the dates or numbers in a valid timeline are not consistent with what it's looking for. And that goes back to the comment I made earlier about the data being laid out in a report format. And so it's already pivoted. It's pivoted across the months. You have two dimensions already in play here. And so what we really need to do in order to make this data work is create a real data table from it. And that would involve unpivoting those columns that are already laid out as the time period. And so you would end up with 3 columns, one for metric, one for the accounting period, and one for the value. You should generally in a table have one value field. And then all of the other fields that are in the table are filters or roll-ups or groupings, however you want to think about that. And so I'm highlighting all of the columns that I want to unpivot here. And you just see that now they're all highlighted in green. Checking that to make sure. And right up at the top there, you will see under the transform, over to the right in the center, it says unpivot columns. And if you highlight those and you click on the unpivot columns, you can convert your report into this magic table. And that looks so much better to work with. Even if you're just going to pull this data back and work in a pivot table and you want to do different groupings or totals or whatever, I use this unpivot a lot for a lot of different reports and things that I'm looking at and building, because now I have a true data table that I can manipulate. And so here you have the data, just couple of other things about transform and using Power Query. You notice those formatting for the values. I just like to see the dollar signs if they're dollars, and I also don't really like anything that's a decimal, so this is my standard format I use. I changed that here in the pivot table, or excuse me, in the data sheet in Excel. And so you can see that works, but you can also jump back over into Power Query, and you can see that at the top it's formatted there as dollars. You don't see the currency symbol, but it's formatted top as dollars. And you see the headings at the top that really don't reflect what is in that field, and so we could rename those. Again, you can do this here or in the spreadsheet. Just call this one metric. We'll call this one date or period. Let's see if I use date. And then the last one, we could leave it value, or I believe just call it amount. And so you change those headings. And then again, we must go to close and load. Looking here to make sure this currency, it's changed as currency. If I change that back to a whole number, it will convert, and it pops up and tells me that if you're going to change it, you could add another step, or you could just replace the one you're on, since that step was changing the type. And so I just tell it to replace here, and now those become numbers. And if you notice on the right, to the left of amount, it changed to a 1, 2, 3. And so now those are numbers, and when I close and load, come back over, it changed my format back to numbers. So I don't like that. You change it back and forth here. So you don't always have to jump in and out of the Power Query in order to do transform. But that's just an example of how you could convert it and then change it back. But you notice we do have the right headers, metric, date, and amount there now. And so our data set is ready to go in and start looking at using the functionality of the forecast sheet that is within Excel. And so just pause for a second, let you kind of take that all in, and we're going to jump back into the sheet, and we're going to look at specifically how the graphic is done. So I've made the data a little bigger here in blue, the colors a little easier to see and read. It's pretty straightforward. Just highlight the data set that you're looking at, go over to data, forecast sheet. Again, this is where we were before, but this time when we click on it, it knows that the data is formatted correctly. And so when you click on the forecast sheet, it's going to open up a box, and there's your graph. And so immediately you can see what it's going to respond with. It gives you your actuals and your forecast. So you can see it's giving me like 6 months out there. Down the bottom here on the left, you have a little box called options. And so I can change the forecast in, and I said, let's take it on out. So now we got it on out to the end of 2026. You also have the ability to edit some of those other variables, but down the bottom, there's a forecast statistics error rate. There's also ability to change it from a line to a bar graph, depending upon which one you want to see. But you use that forecast statistics error rate, and you see the little box that you get up at the top, shows you the accuracy metrics of the graph itself. So that comes right back. Pretty simple. What I sometimes would do if I use this is I'll leave that error box there, and I'll go out and get some descriptions that explain what each one of those statistics means, and paste that in here. So I'm going to cut and paste that over on the sheet. And now you could use this in a report, and they would be able to understand that the alpha and beta and gamma are all smoothing, constant controlling weight, controlling trend, and controlling seasonality, how much effect they have. It also computes the mean absolute scaling error, this symmetric mean error. And I'm just going to cut and paste the exact label. It has the mean absolute error and the root mean square error. Those metrics are we talked about in the cash flow section of the class as well. And so here you have, I've added a chart label at the top and put in that particular metric, and looks just like any other graph that you might have built. You have complete flexibility if you want to add data points or data labels on the graph. You can edit it and change the color or anything that you might want to do. You have the flexibility to work with this just like a regular Excel graph. And again, I'm not in this exercise really challenging the calculation. So the graphs are what they are. So for demonstration purposes, I would otherwise pull this back out and look at some of the math and make sure that I understood what it was doing and why they looked that way. Just to show you, that one looked kind of jagged. Do one on the next metric and you pull it over and it'll look a little bit different. So we'll go to the backlog calculation forecast sheet, click it, and there it is. And so we're going to do the same thing, use options and change it to a longer period of time. Go out 18 months, and down at the bottom include the forecast statistics and calculate it, and it is return the graph. So this one isn't so jagged. It looks a little more what you might have expected or been looking for. I could just extend the size of it. Again, you could make the graphs look, you could change the scale. Just showing this one's a little quicker. After you do the first one, you can cut and paste and add the labeling over here. You notice when I did that, it thought that I was adding another column to the data set. And if you do not want that to be a part of your data range, then the way to correct that is you just highlight the table or click in the table and go to data, table design, and then you can resize the data set in order to take that column I out of the data set. And so I'm just showing you this correction here for reference. And that takes the blue coloring away, makes that look better. And there's your graph. Again, you can add data labels, you can add a chart title. I think I do that in the next step here. Just look back over to the exact way that data is labeled in the original data, and just copy that and then pull that over and put that in your chart title. I also tend to label my tabs with that as well. So when I'm doing this, I typically will click down on the bottom and label the tab as the data set, as well as put the chart heading. And so here you have the second one created. Again, maybe you want a different color. You can click in the chart and have all the flexibility to change the chart color or any other aspect of the chart. And so now we'll move on from that to the third example. And this one is probably my favorite, because now we're going to jump over into AI itself, if you will, and look at ChatGPT. Begin with a brief ChatGPT overview. Then we'll take that CSV data and we'll upload it into the GPT model itself. We'll connect that file and load it into the GPT model. Then we'll look at a discussion back and forth with the GPT on the data itself, and then the different methods for forecasting that it has the ability to do or what it recommends. And then we will allow GPT to create a forecast from the data and export that data into a table. And so we can show you how that the data can come in and out of GPT back into an Excel format if you desire to do that. And then last, we will come back into GPT itself and we will have it do an exercise where it creates the graphs from that data set that it created across all those different methodologies. And this opens up something that's a little more sophisticated, if you will, or it looks a little more impressive maybe than what we did quickly in using Excel Copilot or with the Excel forecast sheet function. The functionality that GPT does here for us is an ability that you could also do within Copilot if you prompted Copilot more. I think I said that earlier, that the more. Okay, so I'm going to start here and show you the GPT models that we could work with. I'm going to be using the GPT-5 fast model for pretty quick answers, but those are the different models that are currently available to you. I'm going to show you a couple things down here under the settings where you can make sure that you control the data for privacy purposes. You want to keep the improve the model for everyone turned off. That keeps your data private. You still need to avoid putting personal identifiable information or client information into the model. Try to do that autonomously, but definitely keep that turned off. If you turn it on, then all of your information goes into the large language models inventory, if you will, of how it builds its understanding. And so here we jump back over and I add the data file, click on the plus and add the file, and it populates back in. So now that test CSV file that we were working with earlier has been loaded into the GPT model just by clicking on the little plus button there and then selecting the file. Once you get the data in, you can begin to interact with the GPT and essentially ask it anything about that data set or have it do anything. This is where you would load contracts if you wanted to get it to help you review a contract, or where you might cut and paste an email and get it to help you redraft. So any kind of data file that you add here, you can begin to work with that data within the GPT model. And so we have the test forecast CSV loaded, and what we'll essentially prompt this to do is to do the same thing that we asked the Copilot to do. And so I said, using my data, help me build a forecast to project the next 12 months on those same fields and provide me insight into the methodology. So it comes back and it immediately says that it has pulled the data and this is what it sees. So you can review that to make sure that it's interpreting it correctly. And then it tells you the next step that it's going to take in building, cleaning the data, and it's going to use these different forecasting methodologies in order to look at the forecast details. And it's telling you which one might be best applied to the different metrics that you're looking at. But it walks you through step by step, and then it ends by asking you what you would like for it to do. And so I'm going to look at that and make a choice, and I'm going to tell it, let's do both. And so pretty straightforward. I'm going to want to compare those. I know that I'm curious to see how they compare. And so again, I just interact and talk with the GPT fairly straightforward, prompting it with whatever it is that I'm asking for. The better the prompt, the better the result. And so if there is something specific you want or don't want, this is where you would delineate that. It's going to react to whatever your prompt is and then give you feedback, much the same as the Copilot did, although the Copilot is more focused specifically on Excel functionality, where here you're wide open. And so I send that in, and it goes out and does some analytics. This is where the speed, fast thinking, or pro, the more time you force it to use in thinking and calculating and researching, the more specific the detail will be. But it comes back fairly quickly with those metrics, and it has done the transformation of the data. And now it's going to take and build two forecasting paths, one using Python to do the ARIMA and the Holt Winters and a profit calculation for each. And I said, yeah, go ahead and do that. It goes out and begins that exercise of running those calculations. Again, I'm demonstrating this for you in real time so that you can see the speed of working with and interacting with the tool. Here, GPT comes back to me and says, hold up, I can't use the profit package in this particular environment. And so you could use the other two methods, the Holt Winters or the ARIMA, and generate forecasts, or try to look at some decomposition of the profit model and build it manually. And so that was intriguing to me. And I asked it, although I knew that the Prophet would need to run in a standalone Python environment, I asked it which environment would I need to use if I wanted to run Prophet, and it's going to respond back to me that in addition to being able to run it in Python, there are other ways to run it. And so you see that you can run it in cloud notebooks like Google Colab or Kaggle. But ideally, you would run it in a Python environment. And I understand that the Python environment within Excel is capable of running that. So if you wanted to jump back into Excel, you could use Copilot to help you build an Excel Python model using Prophet. But it tells you specifically here which ones are good at what type of calculations and where the variables vary and why the Prophet model is stronger in its ability to solve for more robustly the variables over time and smoothing. And so it recommends for us that we use the Holt Winters in ARIMA, which is very solid, and then set up Prophet on a local machine if you have the ability to do that. And I said, well, just for the sake of this exercise, can you calculate a manual Prophet calculation that is accurate? And it comes back and tells me that it can get close. And so again, here I'm just demonstrating the fact that you can have essentially conversation with the model to help you learn and understand and clarify. And this is what is really good in using this tool in any type of an exercise, is it becomes an expert on the fly, if you will. Hallucinations are not as rampant as they were earlier in modeling, so a lot of the information you're going to get is very, very reliable. The higher level of thinking and research you do, you could actually even have it verify and vet the data and give you references in order to get confident with it. But this is a great way to learn and expand your knowledge and understanding of even more than just forecasting. So again, here I just had it move forward with its recommendation, and it's doing the calculations for me to build the graphs. And again, in real time, it fairly quickly comes back and says the forecast ran fine, but the confidence interval shading threw an error, and it recognized that. And so what it's going to do is fix it so that in all three models, you see them side by side with confidence intervals, and generate a table of 12 months of data for you to be able to see not only the graph, but also the data. And it asked me, does it want me to have it prioritize building the graphs or building the table first? And I said, well, let's build the table and look at the data first before we go through the graphs. And so I am typing that in here to have it go out and build us this data table. And so I can get the table from the GPT and then ultimately pull it back into Excel and be able to visually look at the math and the results of the calculations. In potentially, if I wanted, I could leave the data in Excel and go and build visualizations from that data in Excel, like we did in the first two examples. And so here is the calculated using the different forecasting methods for each one of the metrics. It shows that data in a table. And now it's asking me if I wanted to proceed to create the visuals. But up above here, you have the ability to come up and click download that table. And so I'm going to click that and download the table and pull it out into Excel, just so that we can kind of take a look and see what that looks like when that file is created. And offline here, I'm saving and opening the file. It just simply saves it into default folder, and then you can go to that folder and open that sheet up in Excel. It's just a normal Excel sheet. And so here we see the data. It's pretty straightforward. Comes over, you see the history and you see the forecast calculations under the different methods for each one of the metrics. And you can kind of look at this, and if you wanted to work with this in Excel again, you can, but to point out that sometimes the GPT isn't always exactly right. One of the results that is an error here at the bottom, you see the forecasted amounts that it has returned are in the wrong format. Those are not numeric values. They have decimal points with a lot of decimals behind, and you notice the little green corner on the left side of each one indicates that is a text field. And so this data set is not clean. If I wanted to, I could go in and clean and transform this data set, but just as easy, I can go back over to the GPT and have it do the calculation and presentation of the data correctly. And so that's what I'm just demonstrating here. Jump back over and tell it that the values must be numeric. And so I had some text values in there, and I do not want anything to come over as a label. And so again, just type that prompt into the message bar for GPT. Tell it exactly what you want it to do. No text labels, and then send that prompt to the model, and it will respond and build a new table. And the new table should have only numbers in it. And so it's quickly responding, and you have a numeric forecast table. And it tells you what you're seeing. And it tells you that the top portion is empty because there aren't any forecasts during the history, of course. And then it asks you what you want to do now. Do you want to present it in any particular way? I'm going to download it and look at the table again. And so with that, I got the data out and looked at it and decided that what I really didn't want to do at this point was to have to go in and try to build the graphs within Excel for myself. And I really wanted to lean on the computations in GPT and also allow GPT to do the graphs. So I came back and told it this is very good. Now I need to create comparative line graphs with each of the forecasts to follow the actuals over the timeline. Can you create each metric into its own graph? And now remember here, there are actually 3 calculations of each forecasted balance. And so it takes all 3 of those. Each KPI has its own chart, and it shows the actual and the 3 different methods of forecasting and the confidence range around those. And it builds out these much more sophisticated looking graphs. Excuse me. And so you see it comes right back and it gives me the graph for each one. Shading area, those look much more presentable maybe than the ones that we were able to create in Excel. Again, with these, you still have a lot of flexibilities to go back and prompt. You can expand them and make them bigger. You can download them and take them out. But within the prompt, you could go back and have it add data labels. You could change the headings or the fonts or the colors. You could do essentially anything that you would otherwise have to do manually in Excel. You simply do that by changing the prompt that you give to the GPT. And so you see it has created all of these graphs. They all look pretty good. Kind of comparatively, you can start to see there, if you can recall the earlier ones, now that you've got 3 different sets of graphs on these same metrics that you could potentially print these out, lay them side by side, look at them and see how they compare. Maybe you have some modeling you've done on your own you could compare, but the next step would be to look at these, review them, see what makes sense, see where there might be problems, and potentially come back for that next iteration, rerun these calculations, get it well defined, and then once you ultimately get a query, a prompt that is very well defined, that executes and gives you exactly what you want, then you can save that prompt and you could just store it, you could archive it, and then when you have your next data set, you come in, you pull up a new data set. You don't have to go through this whole iterative exercise again. You could just go to your end prompt, cut that, pull it back in, and then it becomes very repetitive. And so that's kind of a third example using Copilot. Just thinking back through what we've covered, there's several best practices you want to keep in mind as you're using forecasting. The first is that you need to be able to continuously update the data and keep it rolling forward. And so the more flexibility your model has, the better. You want to be able to track accuracy against your modeling to see if there are things that might need to change within the variables or within the methods that you're using. You ensure you have good data and that data is collected collaboratively across departments. And as you're going through these modelings and building out variables, you need to make sure that you document what your assumptions are and why those assumptions are being used. There are several key metrics. So we talked in the cash forecasting about days sales outstanding, days payables outstanding, and the cash conversion cycle. Very important metrics for working with working capital. You can also use those calculations within the AI tools. You want to experiment, play with that. And then we talked about ensuring that you use error metrics for the forecasting modeling to make sure that you understand the range of variability that you might expect within the accuracy of the forecast models. The big takeaway here that I hope you get a little bit of appreciation after having watched this is that the AI added to Excel can be an incredibly powerful tool. It can really do a lot for you. It has the ability to create very, very reliable forecasts and do it very quickly. A little bit of front end work to get it all built and set up, but then it's a great, great tool. What I would encourage you to do is come up with a project and start small. Come up with something that you can pilot with your team using some historical data, something that's not overly complicated or sophisticated, but collaborate with your team and bring everyone together on this. Come up with a small pilot project and begin to use AI. Reconvene after you've developed and talk about it and let people get some low-hanging fruit and some small wins to see the efficiency and productivity. But you don't need to do this without policy. And so the very first step in rolling out AI into your work environment is to sit down and develop a very smart AI usage policy. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. My name is Mark Hamilton. If you want to contact me, you can reach me at mark.hamilton@learnvoyage.com. You can also follow me on the ASCPA Connect communities. We're going to start doing routine postings there. I'm also on LinkedIn. Or you might watch for the quarterly AI series that the Alabama Society is developing in the Connections magazine. If you really get into a pickle and you can't figure something out and you need somebody to bounce something off of, try bouncing it off of GPT. It's a very, very reliable and trustworthy tool that is Einstein in your pocket. There's not really much that it doesn't know. You need to learn to do the prompting correctly in order to get the right answers out. But with a little human review and human focus on the back end to make sure that you're getting good information, it can be a very, very powerful tool to help you improve productivity and efficiency. I found a lot of ways to take advantage of the GPT in my workspace and have begun to develop it with all of our team across our corporate group. And there are just an incredible amount of ideas that people have out there about things that are time sink tasks they would like to do more efficiently. You need to find those in your space and try to pick them off one by one. I also include this disclosure. I would recommend if you use AI that you look at using disclosures as well, just to let the persons you're interacting with know that AI was used in developing this white paper or this report or this presentation. Something this simple is pretty straightforward. yours may be one line, one sentence. You may want to include that on your email. You may need to include that in some of your documentation with your clients. But again, this is all developed within your AI policy. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate your attention, and I hope you've learned something. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If you'd really like to learn more about the impacts of AI and technology on our profession, join us on a Learn Voyage, 20 hours of CPE on a 7-day Caribbean cruise. Check us out, www.learnvoyage.com, for the latest dates.